Teacher turnover and working from home. Is there a relationship? Is there a relationship between teacher turnover rates and life changes that cause people to need additional working options other than a traditional 9 to 5? The teaching workforce is predominantly female. The likelihood that a woman will have children at some point in her professional life is still relatively high. It is also likely that child care costs, especially for more than one child, will be cost prohibitive to both spouses staying fully employed. Statistically, the female partner or spouse will quit her full-time job and raise the children until they are in school, then usually attempt to go back to work if possible. This is causing, I believe, a high rate of turnover in the educational profession where we are losing experienced teachers. Since our workforce is predominantly female and the pressure to stay home and raise children is felt significantly more by women than by men, this is especially relevant to our profession. I believe offering part-time and work-from-home options may be able to retain some of the experienced teacher that would otherwise leave the profession. How does this affect student school or district success? Lack of experienced teachers contributes further to additional teacher burnout, lack of leadership in schools and districts, less experienced teachers filling administrative and leadership roles, lack of continuity with parent-community relations, and a lack of historical knowledge of the school and district problems and successes. I will discuss these further in my literature review. Findings from my survey pilot activity studied whether teachers currently forced to work from home due to the coronavirus were enjoying their experience. My findings indicate that out of 11 completed surveys, 5 teachers are enjoying their work-from-home experience while 3 are not and 1 is undecided. Interestingly, all 11 respondents indicated that increased support from their district, better technology, and increased access to childcare would have increased their enjoyment of the working online or working from home experience. 9 out of 11 respondents indicated they had some prior knowledge experience working from home or teaching online and indicated that they would be interested in continuing to work from home. So I feel that these results in a small way support my premise that working from home could have an influence or relationship with lessening teacher turnover rates. I'm interested in learning more about what causes teachers with at least 3 or more years of experience to leave the profession. I'm specifically interested in the rate of teacher turnover due to lack of part-time or work-from-home options. All of the studies that I'll be mentioning basically support the idea that teacher turnover rates are a problem. This establishes justification for my premise that this is a problem and therefore we need a solution. The first study comes from Vanderbilt. It was published by the State News Service. The purpose was they were basically looking at a lot of different facets to try to explain why they were seeing increased student success in low-performing schools in Tennessee. They examined the extent to which Tennessee schools engaging in school turnaround models had been able to recruit and retain highly effective teachers. They studied 2 schools that ranked in the bottom 5% of performance. Overall, both schools recruited more highly effective teachers compared to other priority, non-priority schools in Tennessee. Compared to other types of turnaround schools, the I-zone schools had generally succeeded not just in recruiting but also retaining and developing teachers to higher levels of effectiveness. This relates to my problem because I'm interested in low-performing schools and the relationship between student success and teacher retention. This also indicates that teacher turnover may be contributing to a lack of student success in low-performing schools and also indicates that if we can change the teacher turnover rates, we may see an increase in student success. This is, again, mostly background justification for why teacher retention is a problem in the first place. The second study was published by the North Carolina Department of Public Instruction in the State News Service. The purpose was to address reports of increased teacher turnover over the past 5 years with a significant jump, 14.12 to 14.8% in the 2014-2015 school year. The teacher's most common reason for leaving was personal reasons, which connects this study to my problem because I also believe teacher turnover rates are highly influenced by changing life circumstances, as I mentioned before. This could potentially be helped by additional work options. The personal reasons result was 5 times more likely than termination and 2 times more likely than teachers who left for reasons beyond their control, military move to fulfill a service commitment, retirement, etc. The third study, published in the Phi Delta Kappan Journal in 2002, discussed the trend of experienced teachers leaving the profession at increasing rates for the past 40 years. They noticed a trend in their master's students of disgruntlement with work that led to teacher attrition of those with 5 to 10 years of experience. These teachers are historically the least likely population of teachers to leave their careers. Their method, in a 1996 study of 551 teachers, were followed for 7 years, after which they completed their training programs, and they found that a whopping 49% were not working as teachers. So the researchers for this study contacted the study participants from the beginning study to find out why. The study found the number one reason for leaving was increased accountability due to increased testing and all the paperwork that went with it. Basically, the list of reasons comes down to a work environment, of which pressure to test well was a large part. Possible effects of teacher attrition among experienced teachers mentioned in this article were lack of role models for beginning teachers, lack of district anchor persons to hold policies and themes of school improvement together over a longer period of time. I also believed that these could be results of a lack of experienced teachers, so this study again mostly confirms and justifies my rationale that experienced teacher turnover is a problem that greatly affects our ability as a district to best serve our students and communities. Okay, so ultimately, what is the literature saying here? There's a real problem with teacher retention as it relates to student success, district success. Also, there's a teacher retention problem in the states I'm working with for my demographics, mainly the Midwest, because all of the studies come from there. But the relationship between working from home and part-time options in teaching has yet to be explored. There's a huge gap in the literature, mostly because shaking up the 9-to-5 dynamic is in its infancy in the K-12 education circles. There's a huge gap in the literature in terms of work from home and part-time teaching options for K-12 education. One direction I'm considering going in my research is to look at schools who are combating the problem of teacher retention and try to see what they are basing their strategies on and what research they're working with in order to find further sources of research, because Google searches are not yielding much. I've encountered similar problems doing research on this topic in past courses. There's very little research available on part-time teaching and its relationship to teacher turnover rates. There's also very little research available on telecommuting in education. I really want to research this topic because I feel it's a big part of what's happening in the educational landscape, but I don't know how this lack of research available will affect this project. China is doing a lot of K-12 instructional education online, especially part-time, and they're hiring our teachers. So I'm wondering if they might have some research that could help fill in the gaps. I could also explore school systems trying new ideas to stem teacher turnover, and I could look at curriculum programs that are online based and see if they're having any research-based success. My method. So here's the basic outlines of my plan. I'm not going to be reading the details off the slide here. I'll just be adding clarification to certain points. My plan is to select 5 schools, a random cluster, from a pool of schools that meet the criteria. Contact the administrators of the school to ask to survey all the teachers in the school to see which teachers meet my demographic criteria. From the teachers that meet my criteria, I'll randomly select 25 teachers by assigning each teacher a random number and then selecting randomly the numbers, which is the 2-stage random part of this. I'm thinking the demographics will probably look something like age range 28 to 45, sex distribution largely female because of the childcare requirement. Ethnic breakdown. Since I'm targeting low-income populations, I'm expecting there to be a higher percentage of minority teachers, specifically African American and Hispanic teachers, but I am by no means sure how this breakdown will actually look. I'm looking specifically in the geographic locations defined as the Midwest: North and South Dakota, Nebraska, Minnesota, Iowa, Missouri, Wisconsin, Illinois, Kansas, Michigan, Indiana, and Ohio. The demographic survey measures demographic data, but it also helps me identify my sample, so I would have to code for privacy here and then code also the questions that track the data that I'm interested in for my sample. With the attitudinal scale, which is number 3 down here in my plan, I'm hoping to assess the attitudes or beliefs held by experienced teachers. Why so many are leaving the profession, whether work from home options would influence them personally to continue staying longer in their career field, whether part-time options would influence them personally, whether they believe overall that part-time or work from home options could have an effect on teacher turnover rates, what they believe about the underlying factors behind teacher turnover rates. I would code these beliefs to track attitude trends. I would also use a Likert scale here, and I would use the split half method to check for consistency. For the focus groups, number 2 here on my plan, I would dive more in depth into the personal motivations and factors influencing the experienced teachers. I would learn why the teachers continue in their profession or leave their profession, and what they personally believe about why other teachers are staying or going. I would use narrative scoring here, like a rubric of agreement, and then I would use that rubric to extract some themes. Some strengths. I think I have a good mix of methods here, and that will give me a better complete picture of the problem. There are so many variables in this relationship that I really believe we need to start with the beliefs and attitudes of teachers if we're going to come up with valuable data. Weaknesses, obviously this affects me personally. I am a teacher that has 2 children. I'm a military spouse, and it's very difficult for me to work with childcare costs and constant moving. So there may be some designer bias. There's also a lack of body of research to support, and there could be some evaluation apprehension because I am asking people to self-report. In terms of trustworthiness, in the focus groups, I'd likely hope to gain similar information to the attitudinal scale with possibly more details, which would increase trustworthiness in survey data and also clarify any discrepancies due to misunderstandings or lack of appropriate scale options. I feel my instruments are a good mix of qualitative and quantitative data that would work together to provide a complete picture of the beliefs and attitudes of teachers in relation to my research questions, which also would increase trustworthiness. I like that I'm not relying on one instrument and that they work together to paint a more complete picture. I also like that I'm focusing in on beliefs and attitudes instead of sticking strictly to a quantitative option. All of these things together could give me a good opportunity for triangulation, looking for alignment across data sources during the data analysis process. I could look for trends and themes across all the data sets and individual items. I'd also focus on pilot validity, so I would have experts review my instruments. I would create my instruments myself, but I would base them on existing instruments, which could increase trustworthiness. I would pilot it with a subset of my population, etc. Okay, data analysis. So for the demographic survey, this is mostly categorical, which would be scored to find averages, but also would be represented as percentages of the whole. But some of the questions on the demographic survey would be used to help me select a representative sample size that fits my criteria for the pilot and the focus groups and the attitudinal survey. So I would code those questions, Q1, Q2, and so on, so I could track them separately and then choose respondents whose answers indicated they would be good candidates for further involvement. For the focus groups, like I said, this would be narrative data and theme extraction using that rubric of agreement. I would need to transcribe the interviews and code all the respondents for privacy reasons, and then I would need to code the themes for ease of data analysis. The attitudinal survey is where it gets a little complicated. I would use a Likert scale here. First, I would assign each scale a value, 1 to 7. Then looking at my data set, I would calculate how many people fell into each category for each question and multiply the number of persons by the value of the category. Then I would divide the total number by the number of participants. Wherever the answer fell on the ranges of values per category is the average level of agreement or disagreement with the question. I could then represent each individual category as a percentage of the whole, and also represent each question as an average of agreement. Using this data, I could then compare it with the focus group themes and see if there are any correlations. Because my study is mixed methods, I wanted a tool that would help me determine the extent of the relationship between more varied work options for teachers and the rate of experienced teachers leaving the profession. I think the best tool for this would be correlational coefficients. I would use my data from the focus groups and survey for this and see whether there is any strong, weak, or no relationship. Human subjects protection. So for human subject protection, I would obviously need informed consent, so I would have to make sure that I had that documented and that all my participants were able to fully understand what was being asked of them. There's very limited possibility of harm. We're not dealing with a sensitive subject, but I would need to ensure the anonymity of data and data security, so I would do coding for privacy, and I also store in a secure location with password-protected laptop. Thank you so much, and I hope you enjoyed my presentation.